Hello, class. Welcome to week 3. And for those of you who watch the Super Bowl, it's pretty eventful down to the last minute game. Didn't see that coming, throwing the ball. I don't know, but at least Pete Carroll's taking responsibility, I guess. I'm not a Patriot or a Seahawks fan, so it was just kind of a fun game for me to watch. For those of you who are actually rooting for someone, maybe a bit stressful or disappointing. But anyway, back to week 3. So this week is the last week that you have to work on your narrative speech because we will be meeting next week to give the narrative speeches. I'll post some more information, answer some more questions on those. If there's a forum under speeches that has the narrative speeches there, if you want to list what you're thinking about, I'm more than open to giving you some ideas and some examples there as well. So try to get that going so at least by the weekend you can have some time to practice on it. So week 3, we're going to cover chapters 4 and 5. And one of the most important things that we cover and we discuss as a public speaker is actually your audience. It's really great and important to know who you are and how you will interact and what your topic is. But it's most important to focus on your audience. This is where a lot of speakers change, or where the difference between a good speaker and a great speaker is the focus on the audience. It really matters so much less about how I feel or what I think about a topic if I haven't considered what my audience feels or what my audience thinks. Because they're not going to listen to me if I'm not talking with them. If I'm talking at them, below them, or above them, if I'm blaming them, then they're just not going to feel it. And I may have a very great speech and I may not make hardly any mistakes, but an effectiveness of a presentation or a speech is judged on, did it resonate with your audience? Did you move people? So that's pretty important for you to be aware of. The issue that a lot of people face is that we tend to think that our audience sees the world the way we see the world, especially when you're in an area like a small rural area. You tend to think that everyone holds the same beliefs and values that you do. And probably for the most part, on a lot of issues people do, but there are differences. And sometimes those who have different viewpoints or different opinions keep them quiet in an area like this just so they're not always having to defend it or not always having to argue or talk about it. So thinking that everyone, because you haven't heard them say anything different, agrees with you is one of the biggest mistakes that someone can make when they're giving a speech. Also, we talked about the listening and your listening skills and your communication skills. A lot of you mentioned that you're a great listener as long as you're interested in the topic. Well, that's true for all of us. Nobody's a great listener if they're bored to death. So it's your responsibility as a speaker, as a communicator, to not bore your audience. And so understanding what your audience will be doing, what time of the day you're presenting to them, where their attention span will be, what their interest in your topic will be, goes a long way to not boring your audience and ensuring that you're creating the best possible experience for them to listen to you. So we'll cover a lot of trying to understand your audience, and this comes a lot to play throughout the semester as we work on each of your speech topics. A lot of your assignments are going to be audience based. What does your audience feel? How does your audience feel about this topic? So you have 2 assignments this week, which is a little bit lighter than most of the weeks you've had thus far. Your discussion question, once again, is due Wednesday by 10:59 p.m., and I'm going to look over here and read it real fast. So your discussion question should answer the following question, so you need to answer both of these, and it's from personal experience, but you want to make sure you have a firm understanding of the content in chapters 4 and 5 so you can relate your personal experience to the actual material. Just sharing the experience and not connecting it doesn't fully count as an answer. So the questions are, have you been in an audience where a speaker did not take heed to finding an appropriate speech goal or topic? So that's one of those times where you're sitting somewhere, you're going to a presentation, to a training, and the person who's speaking to you is just, they have no clue who the audience is. Their topic may be inappropriate. Their examples may be inappropriate. It may have worked for a different group as opposed to the group that they were speaking to. So if I'm conducting training to blue-collar workers, I would not use the same presentation materials that I would for, let's say, bankers. It may be the same. Maybe I'm trying to train them on communication skills, conflict resolution, but the same examples and the same material isn't going to work. So that would be an example of where there was a disconnect. And then, what does it feel like when a speaker does not fully understand or attempt to understand their audience? And maybe you haven't seen this in a formal speech presentation setting. Maybe it's been in an office meeting, or maybe it's been in a classroom, maybe it's been in a training group, or maybe sometimes it's even been in small group interactions. So I know that sometimes a lot of students say, well, I haven't been to many speeches, and we don't understand that you're presenting and you're speaking kind of formally or informally, most of our lives, we're around these types of communication. You may not be behind a podium and you may not be speaking for 10 minutes with a PowerPoint presentation, but you're still giving a speech or you're still presenting material. So if you can't think of an actual time when you were there in a speech setting, think about other formal types of or informal types of communication that you've had where this hasn't taken heed. So use your personal experiences, but make sure you connect it to the material in the book as well. And then your assignment that is due by Saturday at 10:59 p.m. for chapters 4 and 5. It's to write a brief 2 to 3 sentence summary of some of the key descriptors of this class. Okay, so that's your audience. Now this is going to be a little bit difficult because you've only met once and you've only been interacting on the forums for 2 weeks. This will be the third week. So by the time those assignments due, you'll have 3 weeks of classroom interaction online and 1 class meeting. Granted, you'll learn more about people after next week, and you'll learn more about people after the informative speeches. And so this is something that I want you to keep with you and continue to add to. So as you're developing each of your speeches, you're creating a more full picture of who your audience is. And this is important because many times we're not allowed surveys or we're not allowed to poll our audience, but we have to learn to make observations and not to use stereotypes or to overgeneralize our audience, but to try to figure out who they are as unbiasedly as we can. And we'll talk about bias when we get into the research chapter, and as humans, we're completely incapable of being unbiased. So our goal is to be as unbiased as we possibly can, knowing that we're always going to stereotype or generalize to a certain extent. Take the time to think of 5 possible informative speech topics and 5 possible persuasive speech topics. You can change your mind, and then for each of these 5, list 1 or 2 possible questions that you would want to ask your audience. So this is a 3-part assignment. The first part, list 2 to 3 sentences, some general descriptors about your audience. The second part, I want you to start thinking about your informative and persuasive speech topics. And then after you've thought about those, I want you to think about possible questions to ask your audience regarding those topics. And it's important when you're knowing your audience that you don't ask obvious questions and you don't ask questions that don't matter. You want to know your audience's comfort level, knowledge level, exposure to what you're wanting to talk about, their personal experiences related to what you're talking about, their values, especially when it comes time for your persuasive speech. You want to make sure that you understand where their values reside or how their feelings, where their emotions reside with your topic. And in this class, you're going to give the opportunity to actually poll your audience, which you don't have a lot of in real life scenarios. But the polling is important because it'll help you see the diversity that is in our class. And I say this at the beginning of every week, and someone will email me, they'll be like, I really don't think there's going to be much diversity. I think a lot of people are going to be, on board with my topic. And the diversity might not be in the way that they're thinking, but there is diversity there. There is difference there. So those are your 2 assignments, and that's chapter 4 and 5. We're going to talk a lot about speech goals and audiences. So I'll see you in the forums. Have a good day. Bye.